What is leadership? I believe this is the fundamental question every leader needs to answer before starting their journey towards becoming an effective leader. If you depend on the definition of others, you will get lost in the words of others. Ask Google the question, what is leadership? You will get 548 million results. You can narrow it down by looking for leadership books on Amazon, but you'll still get offered 212,000 choices. To help you get started with your definition, let me share a story of my definition. One that I discovered after 20 years of leading and working with leaders. When I was 22 years old, I stood in a tube station in London, waiting for a train. A disembodied voice announced, "Mind the gap." It took me a while to realize I was being warned to watch my step. Little did I know that seeds were being planted to help me answer the question, what is leadership? A couple years ago, I was asked to present my work and methods to a group of business development consultants. When I was making a slide about leadership, it suddenly hit me. Leadership is the ability to create and successfully manage the closing of gaps. Here are 3 gaps leaders need to master. The first gap a leader needs to focus on is creating a performance gap for an organization. This is strategic planning and is often talked about with words like BHAG, vision, or 5 to 10 year plan. This gap is most often associated with iconic visionaries like Martin Luther King Jr., Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, John F. Kennedy, or Jeff Bezos. It is actually work for all leaders, and defining this gap is one of the key jobs of any effective leader and leadership team. The second gap is working to define and bridge the smaller gaps that have to be crossed while closing the first gap. Imagine you are essentially building a bridge while you stand on it, moving toward what was defined by the first gap. This is often called operational planning, and is where we define resources, challenges, priorities, and who will do what work. This is where healthy leadership teams argue and ultimately commit to a direction they believe will start bridging the big organizational performance gap. Effective teams love this work, but it is hard. It risks getting derailed by ego of the leaders, the surprise issues that disrupt the plan, and the inability of the leadership team to react and manage those issues. Legendary boxer Mike Tyson once said, "Everyone has a plan until they get hit." This gap is about effectively responding and moving through the hits your businesses will take each day. The third gap is managing the individual performance gaps that will be created by doing the first 2 gaps. People do the work. A leader's job is to recognize that having the right people to do the work is critical. Jim Collins introduced us to the concept of right person in the right seat. The reality is that when we define the work to bridge the gap, we can change the jobs that people have been asked to do. Imagine sitting down in a comfortable leather recliner, falling asleep, and waking up on a short sofa. That discomfort is what people feel when change is thrust upon them by leaders. An effective leader works to coach, support, and develop people to have the capacity to close the gaps that have been created. Leadership is the ability to create and successfully manage the closing of gaps. Gaps are simply the space between where we are and where we want to go. It is that simple, and it is not easy. In business, it becomes a complex exercise to define your current state and then use metrics and a vision to define a preferred future state. If you want to explore how you can effectively lead through the gaps, download the free ebook on Amazon. Don't avoid gaps, lead through them. Lead well, and don't just mind those gaps, master them. Scott Patchin, thetruegroup.com. Questions or need a keynote speaker? Scott@thetruegroup.com.